Hey, welcome back to the Special Fish Podcast, episode 3. Okay, so for my topics, I chose some pretty heavy hitters like the Epstein scandal for my first one, Russia, Ukraine with the second one. The third one was the Patriot Act, and the fourth one being cryptocurrency. Now, for my first topic, there's a lot of biases with it. Epstein was a high-powered individual with a lot of power and money. But it always didn't start that way. Evil starts from somewhere. See, Jeffrey Epstein was a neurophysics professor at Dalton School in the mid 1970s. And then one day, one of his students' father will put him in touch with a senior at Wall Street Bank, Bear Stearns. And then later, and this would become very good for him, and it'd make him very successful, basically. In 1982, Epstein would go on to open J. Epstein & Co., which became a massive success, gaining the net worth of $1 billion. This new influx of cash or money would lead him to go on to buy a mansion in Florida, New York, and a ranch in New Mexico. And this is where you can see some of my sources come into play, like the BBC and AP News helped out a lot in this. Because the BBC said around this time he started socializing with some high-ranking officials and celebrities, and also around this time he and Harvey Weinstein, another well-known sex offender, would try to buy New York Magazine but fail. He would also donate $30 million to Harvard and start dating Ghislaine Maxwell. He would also have more political friendships and, more well-known ones. Like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, where in a 2002 interview, Donald Trump will say, Epstein, he's a terrific guy. But Epstein will have a lot of issues in the coming years. And it all started in 2005 when the police would get a call from the parents of a 14-year-old girl claiming Epstein molested her at his Palm Beach home. This is where the police chief, Reuther, would tell the Miami Heat press, this is a 50-something she's and one he, and the she's basically told the same story. Or in other words, if this is just a he said, she said, there's a lot more she's saying the same thing. When this happened, a columnist named Michael Wolff would also state, he has never been secret about the girls. With more people's suspicion arising and more evidence gaining over the years, in 2008, prosecutors made a deal with Epstein and Alexander Kusta, not too long after Epstein would be getting in trouble for said molestation. Alexander Kusta will also go on to be Trump's future Secretary of Labor. The deal they made was that Epstein would avoid getting federal charges, but only 18 months in prison with work release, which meant he could still go to work and leave the prison during this 18 months. In the end, he only served 13 and was released on probation. And then in December 2010, the case would pick up again when Prince Andrew, not the son, but in relation to the British royal family, would be pictured with that scene in New York City. Then Virginia Robert, now Virginia Giuffre, would start a case against the prince, saying she slept with him in the early 2000s when she was 17. Most likely rape, but that's what the news article said. AP News mentioned how new documents was later released, saying Giuffre was lured from a job at Mar-a-Lago Club and became Epstein's masseuse. This court case would end with a settlement between her and the prince, not going anywhere. During said case, there was talks about interviewing possible witnesses like Bill Clinton, but those fell through and never were able to happen. Epstein would finally get, in 2015, one last big lawsuit against him from Johanna and Soderbergh, who was another victim who came out. According to AP News, Johanna would testify that she never met Bill Clinton but did see Donald Trump. Michael Jackson as well, as she said she saw there, along with David Copperfield. This led to them questioning David Copperfield, but nothing came of it. She also made a mention onto how, on the way to one of Epstein's many court cases, they made a pit stop at one of Trump's casinos and spent the night with him. This is really where the case would end, news-wise, because Epstein would be arrested in 2019. Alexander Kusa, Trump's current, at the time, Trump's Secretary of Labor, would resign after the news about Epstein came out and his role in keeping Epstein out of jail. And then on August 10th, 2019, the cameras went down and the guards somehow weren't paying attention and Epstein allegedly would kill himself. The suspicion and the suspicious causing around the death will lead the internet to start saying it was murder and accusing random people of it for it. People who got blamed for this was Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other random celebrities. Boom. Okay, the internet would also go on to blame people, again, accusing them that they were on the island. Jimmy Kimmel in 2023 would be accused of this after Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers football player or something, would make a joke saying that he was on there and the internet would run with it. The case would heat up before this in 2022 with Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's girlfriend and partner in crime, being arrested in New Hampshire and sentenced to 20 years in jail. And the final thing, it'll all come breaking down in 2024 when more cases, more documents would be released, revealing names like Stephen Hawking, who did go on the island. He claimed, his estate claimed it was for scuba diving and a party or something like that. And then finally in 2025, Virginia Giuffre, the biggest victim of Epstein, would kill herself just after the Donald Trump second administration would treat the Epstein files as a political joke, and the House GOP Twitter account would post a link saying Epstein files. When you clicked on said link, it was Rickroll and not the files. The Epstein scandal follows our theme of public moods and scandals and is one of America's biggest mishandling of justice. And in the end, no one really faced the crime for the sex trafficking of children and the rape of children that happened there. Because
How do we know the kids weren't just lying?
in the end, no one would really face justice as Prince Andrew walks free. Both people that were both former presidents and current president that were accused of possibly doing something still have a good chunk of power. Ghislaine Maxwell will be free by 2042, and Epstein really didn't get to spend that much time in jail. He kind of died. And social media also made it into some kind of witch hunt. So no one really will ever face justice for this, making the mishandling. And again, it follows our theme of public mood and scandal. Any questions?
I noticed how you specifically chose to follow the relationship between Epstein and Trump. What kind of led you to? Was it just like the fact that he's like one of the most powerful out of the people that were like suspects? Like, what led you to like that specific relationship?
Okay, so I mean, the reason
I'm
why,
not hating or anything. I'm just being like,
yeah,
I'm
no, I
actually
understand.
interested in why he chose it.
So the reason why I went with the whole Trump Epstein thing was one because the two articles I had follow that relationship very closely, and surprisingly too, Epstein and Trump are surprisingly very very good friends in general itself. So I feel like it would be wrong if I didn't at least bring up Trump because I mean he's currently the president now, but he and Epstein rub shoulders very often, and they talk very highly about each other. And compared to Epstein's relationship with Bill Clinton, it just wasn't as good. Don't get me wrong, Bill Clinton and Epstein were definitely. To pick something a bit more lighthearted, the Russia and U.S. relations in Ukraine. See, the Ukraine war is filled with propaganda from both Russia and America on both sides. You can see this if you just open up the app. The two articles I used for this were the Council on Foreign Relations and the U.S. News. So there's going to be a bit biases in those, but I felt like they did a pretty good job. And the whole war really dates back to the early 1990s. Because you see, on December 1st, 1991, Ukraine would gain independence from the USSR. And 3 years later, Ukraine would sign the Budapest Memorandum, which would not help them out in the long run. According to the U.S. News, this is the bill that signed away Ukraine's nuclear missiles and that they had to give them back to Russia. It also meant Russia wouldn't attack them. This was signed by the US and the UK as well. This left Ukraine in a position where they were basically defenseless, nuclear-wise, from Russia. Then in 2004, there would be an election. Viktor Yushchenko, a Western supporter, would go up against Viktor Yanukovych, a Russian supporter. Yushchenko would be mysteriously poisoned before the election, but he survives. And in the end of the election, Yanukovych, the Russian supporter, would win the election. The people of Ukraine saw this as a fraudulent win and knew that there is no way Yanukovych won the election and Yushchenko, the guy who got poisoned, lost. This started mass protests of people wearing the Yushchenko campaign color, orange. Hence the given name, the Orange Revolution. This forced a re-election where Yushchenko won. Later, and a couple of years later, Ukraine would try to seek a NATO membership, but Putin, the Russian president at the time, would be very vocal about his opposition to this. According to the U.S. News, he would allegedly tell George W. Bush that Ukraine was, quote-unquote, not even a real nation state. Not too long later, NATO would reject the membership offer. In the 2010s came more problems. Yushchenko would win the 2010 election, and he also arrested political opponent Yulia Tymoshenko. This would also be around the time Yushchenko would orientate himself closer to Russia. This led to a mass protest, which would end in the death of 130 people, and Yushchenko fleeing the country. And then a few years later, I think in 2014, Russia sent in special forces to seize Crimea and saying it was a military operation and that was to help the Russian population there or something like that. Which it wasn't, it was them annexing Crimea. In 2019, Vladimir Zelensky would win the Ukraine election. This would be a start of a new era for Ukraine. In 2021, Zelensky cracked down on pro-Russian oligarchs. In October, the U.S. would hold a White House meeting over rising tensions. This crackdown on Russian oligarchs enraged Putin, and this is where he would ask that were given that said Russian oligarchs were given security guarantees, and he basically demanded this. And then, on February 21st, 2022, breakaway parts of Ukraine would start to be seen as sovereign as Russia. So at this point, Russia really does not like Ukraine. And 3 days later, the barrel of gunpowder will explode. On February 24th, 2022, Russia will launch a full-scale invasion on Ukraine. According to CFR, they attacked hospitals, residential areas, and transportation infrastructure with long-range missiles. The U.S. immediately responded by putting sanctions on Putin and 1,000 other Russian people and companies. The war caused international outrage at Russia. On September 11th, 2022, Ukraine forced Russian troops to retreat. 10 days later, Russia annexed regions of Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia. The war would start to slow down at this point. On June 23rd, 2023, Russian mercenary groups staged a coup in the country. The group was led by Yevgeny Prigozhin. The coup would fail, and he would die in a mysterious plane crash 2 months later. 6 months before this, on January 25th, Germany and the U.S. would give tanks to Ukraine, and a month later, Biden and Zelensky would walk through Kiev as alarms were blaring. The war would get worse on June 6, 2023, where a breach at Novakovka Dam caused severe flooding. This wouldn't be the only issue. Power source having areas because in February 2022, a year before this, when the war really started attacking, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was reported as having a possible breach and a chance at leaking nuclear waste, but nuclear science were able to get in there and the fears were confirmed not to be true. In 2024, North Korea would send 10,000 troops to support Russia. And at the current point we're at, both sides are making close to no advances besides Ukraine taking the Kursk Oblast and recently damaging Russia's Air Force in a drone strike. And you'll see with this war, drone strikes become very popular. By 2025, the U.S. has given tanks and other military supplies and $118 billion to Ukraine. When Trump was elected, that aid would start to disappear. There was a brief time where Ukraine and Russia were fighting over a ceasefire, but after the recent attack, that's most likely not going to happen in any time soon. This follows a course of foreign policy and conflict. U.S. is very against Russia actions, as you can see throughout this. Funding Ukraine, aid for Ukraine started to disappear, but as we can see with the recent attack, Ukraine still has a chance to hold up against themselves. Any questions?
One question before I have to go.
Yep.
What effect do you think it has that, like, it's still in living memory that there's a lot of people in Ukraine that remember living in the USSR under Soviet reign and kind of remember that and say, we don't want to go back to that? And do you think they're fighting harder because of that? What do you think that, like, living memory has effect on the war?
I think because during the USSR's reign, Ukraine was hit heavily by famine. So I think that, again, is a good chance of people seeing what Putin wants and knowing how they were under the USSR and basically saying, no, we don't want this. But I think the big thing that's helping them fight harder is that Russia, for the most part, isn't aiming for military targets and is aiming more for civilian targets than anything else. I think is, again, really helping them boost their, help convincing them to fight harder. Topic, I chose the Patriot Act. See, the case is pretty open and shut with no real biases because both the sites articles I chose were PBS and Ebisco, which were both really good at showing just what the article, what the bill itself and act says itself. So you see, back on October 26, 2001, George W. Bush signed the Patriot Act into law. The act allowed enhanced government ability to prevent terrorism through mass surveillance. Through this bill and act and stuff, this allowed things like increased surveillance and sneak and peek searches, which allowed the government to look around private property without warrants, which would have been a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It also gave them the authority to detain anyone without charges and remove their right to a trial if they not citizen or not. Ebisco stated that Section 215 of the Act gave the NSA permissions for data collection and spying programs. In 2004, the Supreme Court would allow the Bush admin to detain foreign or American civilians without trial if they are enemy combatants. Most would end up at Guantanamo Bay. In 2006, the court trial of Hamadan versus Rumsfeld ruled that Guantanamo Bay was not something that was legally allowed to happen. But at this point, At this point, people started to be very concerned over civil liberties and what the government was actually doing behind closed doors. The American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, would become very concerned about the civil liberties of others. They would go on to file a lawsuit in 2006. A district court, which District Court Judge Ann Diggs Taylor would rule against the Bush administration. The ruling was basically that the Patriot Act, seeing out government overreach of the executive branch. Judge Taylor would go on to tell Bush, there are no hereditary kings in America and no powers not created by the Constitution. The court order would go on to be reversed on July 6th of 2006, saying the ACLU had no right to sue. This would go to the Supreme Court, but instead on February 9th, 2008, the Supreme Court would refuse to hear the case. In 2010, Obama would extend the Patriot Act, and then in 2011, he would sign a 4-year extension for the act, even though it was very clear of what was going on behind the scenes. The Patriot Act will all come crumbling down when in 2013, two big things would happen. Edward Snowden and the New York court case. According to PBS, there was an uproar over the Patriot Act due to a man who worked for the NSA leaking documents. This man would be Edward Snowden. He leaked and whistleblow how much data the NSA was really collecting on phones, and that they actually were doing just mass surveillance and collecting data on U.S. civilians basically without a warrant, which would again go up against the Fourth Amendment and possibly the First Amendment. A lot of people became shocked about this, that it wasn't just tapping terrorist phones, but also civilian ones. New York State would sue over this, along with conservative lawyer Larry Klayman, where it is ruled that there is government overreach, but the Federal Intelligence Service Surveillance Council said New York was wrong. Congress was already planning to replace the act, and then on June 15th, the act expired, and from 2015. The act expired, and from its severed head rose the Freedom Act. The Freedom Act was the replacement of the Patriot Act, just updated. It basically was the same act, just with some things in there, and made it look nice. It removed the NSA phone tapping, because that wasn't too popular with the American people. Then in 2024, Section 702 from the old FISA Act would have the chance to be brought back. This would allow the government to spy on foreign nationalists overseas. A lot of people didn't like this, but that's basically where the Patriot Act ends there, with basically itself just being a mass government overreach. This falls into our course theme of domestic policy. Any questions?
Do you believe that what Snowden did was right? And B, do you think his efforts were in vain with how little it actually did get done at the government level?
Do I think what Snowden did was right? Do I think what Snowden did was right? I think that what he leaked should have been leaked and shouldn't have existed. Like I said before, is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I think what he did after the fact, and the fact that he leaked some personal info about certain agents, is not right. I think where I don't see him more as a hero, and the reason why I don't see him as a hero, is the fact once they finally put two and two together, he fled to Russia like a coward instead of facing it head on. But yeah, that's at least my opinion. And I don't think it was all in vain. And I only say that because at least now we know exactly what we are up against and what exactly they were doing. But what do I know? For topic 4, I picked something on the economic side, cryptocurrency. For the two articles I chose for cryptocurrency was Fox Business, a right-wing business site, and NPR, which is a bit more center leftist. And you see, with cryptocurrencies, started in January 2009 with the founding of Bitcoin. It was founded by a man by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. but it wouldn't make its first trade till 2010 because in 2010, May of that year, developer Laszlo Hanyek traded away 10,000 Bitcoin for a $25 Papa John's pizza. At the time, the 10,000 Bitcoin would have been worth about $41. Today, it would be millions. In the next coming years, Bitcoin would raise in price. In February 2011, it would even surpass the US dollar for value. According to Fox Business, in 2018, it would hit a high of $19,873, but in 2018, it would crash and stay steady. But as Bitcoin would rise and fall and rise again, more less reliable cryptocurrency would rise, or more different forms of it, like NFTs and other crypto coins like Dogecoin, or the monkey NFTs. NPR stated that Justice Sun was a crypto entrepreneur and founded the coins of Tronix and BitTorrent, which would end up being scams. But he was also really big at the time and really good at it. So when they came out as scams, he got in big trouble. Another thing would also start to come on the rise that would end up hurting the cryptocurrency market massively. Pump and dumps and trade washing. Pump and dumps are when you have a bunch of people put money into a cryptocurrency you have money for, and then when it reaches a peak, you immediately withdraw all your stocks into cryptocurrency, which then makes the cryptocurrency value collapse and depreciate with only you being the one who makes the real money out of it. And those who lose money end up being the people you support, that support you. A bunch of celebrities would end up getting in trouble for this by using their fan base for it. Think of Logan Paul, Lindsay Lohan, Soulja Boy, and Martha Stewart. In 2022 and 2023, SEC start getting more involved in this, and they would start investigating all these pump and dump schemes. They would charge Kim Kardashian. March 2023, and Justice Sun would also follow not too long later. In recent times, President Donald J. Trump would make his own cryptocurrency for his presidency, and Haley Walsh, known for her Hawk Tuah meme, would also get in trouble because her Hawk Tuah meme coin turned out to be a pump and dump. But Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are still on the rise. This whole theme is important to American today as cryptocurrency becomes more value and more well-known and popular. It has a chance of becoming its own form of currency itself, even possibly replacing the US dollar, which I doubt, but you never know. And this follows our course theme of economic, and that's about it. Yeah. Any questions?
So, obviously, right now the main coins are used as kind of investments due to their instability. What do you say to stable coins and their possible future as like currency actually being used to like buy things?
I think for big coins like Bitcoin, they don't have much to worry about but I think the biggest thing right now is if we want cryptocurrency to be able to be sustainable, we need not like almost, because right now with anyone can make a cryptocurrency and scam whoever they want out of some money. And I think if you really want cryptocurrency to possibly be able to become a thing where you can pay for stuff with it, you're going to need to work on wiping out those scammers. Because if you because right now it's too unreliable to be trusted. But that's my own personal opinion on it.
Gotcha.